Hi, this is my Digital Go teacher, Dawn Sprinkle, coming to talk to you today about the well-organized Google Classroom. So, Classroom set up for elementary and self-contained classes. This is for a teacher who has primarily the same group of kids throughout the day, although it seems like it would maybe make sense to have all of your subjects in one classroom. I would highly advise against that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think that having it as a one-stop shop makes it easy, but I do know there is a limit of topics that you can have. I want to say it's around 150. I'm not 100% sure. Um, and if you then break it into the different subject areas like English, social studies, math, you have that big overarching class, and then you could have the individual topics, whether that be daily or by unit. I talk about topics a little later in the video. What I also like too is that when you go and you post homework and you're using those due dates, students would be able to see across the board the homework that are in the different content areas. Sometimes if you have multiple homework assignments, think about remote teaching. If you have assignments that have to be completed in each and every classroom, that little box in Google Classroom that's on the classroom page would only show up to like maybe 3 different assignments, so students then may miss that as well. So that is why I would say for the elementary and the self-contained classroom is that you should definitely have separate Google Classrooms for each content area. However, for the middle school and high school, um, I would recommend that you have one Google Classroom per class, not subject area. So even if you teach a class um, multiple times during the day, it does help to have it broken up by period. The reason is that if you're going to be doing any grouping, it's easy then to just look at the 24 kids that are in that class and then pair them up if you're going to give them a shared Google slide to work on. Um, I've heard some teachers talk about having a different Google Classroom per unit. And I, in some ways, would also advise against that because you are just one teacher in a middle school or high school student's day. If every teacher decided to make a new Google Classroom for every unit, it's going to just get chaotic because they're going to keep having to add new codes and all of that. However, if you get really good at using your topics wisely, it's all there in that one class. The other thing too is that if you have a resource teacher, a special ed teacher that's going to support, you can add them in as a teacher or even as a student, but I would say preferred as a teacher so that they could be added into that class. If you then added a new unit every time, you would have to add that individual every single time. The first area I want to talk about are these settings in your Google Classroom. There are settings for the overall Google Classroom. If you click on the hamburger up in the corner, scroll all the way down to the bottom. Below the archive classes is the settings. And the big thing in here is your profile picture, but also notifications. You can get notifications sent directly to your email for a variety of things, for comments, classes you're enrolled in, classes you teach, class notifications. I personally turn them off because it ends up clogging my Google, my Gmail feed during the day, and I might end up missing out something important from administration or specifically a student. Um, we will talk later in here about how to deal with late assignments if you do choose to turn this off. And once you turn it off, it turns it off for all classes. Or again, you can select specific items that you want to then have them turned on for, whether it's classes you teach or anything else. But again, I just turn those off. Google Classroom, I'm going to go to the settings for this period, which is my English 1. Settings is something that you have to set up for each individual class. I click on the little sprocket, and I could go in here and do the details. Under General, I like to, for the stream, only have teachers post or comment. If a student wants to get in touch with me with a question, they can go ahead and send me an email because I'm a high school district. I have seen that sometimes if teachers do not set up parameters about the usage of this, it can just end up clogging up your stream with just a bunch of unnecessary comments. So if you are going to keep that on, make sure that you set those parameters for your students. Classwork on the stream, I like to hide the notifications just because I feel like students then go and dig through the stream instead of looking at having well-organized topics in classwork. Guardian summaries, if you're turning that on, if you have teachers that are able to do that on, one note is that if you turn it on for your class, and there are other teachers in your district or in your building using that, it turns it on for that student in all their classes. Next, we're going to talk about creating and organizing my Google Classroom topics. You are going to want to figure out some things about how you're going to create your topics. So there are going to be things that maybe you use daily, or they're frequent items that you're going to want students to be able to access multiple times. You may have set resources that students can use throughout. That would be beneficial for them to know about. And then, of course, you may want to set things up by units. Here are just some sample topics I've created that you can go ahead and put in there, whether it's that these are things you think students are going to use, or if parents are helping at home with remote learning, that they would be able to get to. I'm going to give you a peek into a couple of my Google Classroom so that you can see how I organize the topics. This one is my special ed resource, for example, and Google Classroom puts the newest items on top. You could go ahead and always move them as well if you want to. So if I want remote learning up here, that's how I sometimes make sure that items are where they need to be. So, end of the year, I had a year-end checklist, a grade check Friday, something that they would do on a regular basis. We had to do an end of the year STAR testing. So all these things you can go ahead and organize for that. So this is a resource class. I had a senior writing class. We had a revision log. I will go into more detail about that later. But this one was primarily, we had numbered units. So students would be able to see these different numbered units to know what they were going to do. Journal was something that we did more frequently within all the units, so they were able to access that. And then course documents, that beginning of the year syllabus and all that. Last one is my freshman English. I had things named based on topics of the novels that we did. That journal, the same thing. I use it with my freshmen as well. SSR, any of our writing or other materials too. With remote learning also being a part of our schedule for this year, I am making sure to even create topics for office hours and remote learning. So I will have all my office hours here. And they will be able to find the info so that they can go ahead and get into the Zoom directly from here. As you can see, I just accidentally moved something because it does that. As well as for remote learning, I would rather have students be able to click directly here and actually change it on the assignments for the due date on that, so that they can easily find it versus having to go into Google Classroom and see the calendar appointment or going into Gmail. I really want my Google Classroom to be a one-stop shop for them. Next is talking about creating those assignments, naming those assignments, making sure that we do it in a way that students are actually going to hopefully easily complete the work that we are going to share with them. Again, I'm back in a Google Classroom. This one is for my freshman resource class. I could go up to create. It will allow me to create an assignment. I also like material. Material is great for things that students don't necessarily need to complete, such as syllabuses and stuff. And then, topics as well, you could create from here as well. So if I go into assignments, always make sure you're giving a good title. Be good about how you're titling things. Kids who struggle with finding things don't know how to deal with your system of organization. Instructions, I will use this specifically if I am going to have a multi-part project where students are going to keep going in and doing something new, especially for writing. Maybe benchmark 1 is going to be doing the introduction paragraph. Benchmark 2 is that they have to do that first body paragraph. So I'll tell them what the different benchmarks are and what the due dates are. For the due date, you could go ahead and move this So let's say I wanted to have a due date of the 27th. If you want to use time, you can. Topic, I'm going to pretend it's under Grade Check Friday, and I'm going to just put test here. And what I like about this is that when I assign something with an actual date, if I go back to classes, here it is. It says right here that the test, it pops up there. Not only does it pop up there, but it pops up into their calendar. Right here, so that you can see that assignment test is there. And I think that's important, is that you need to take the time to make sure that you're putting as much info in there. Another thing that I think is big for students who may not be the best tech savvy or have organizational issues is that when I create an assignment, I like to actually give the students the blank document that I expect them to be using. So I'm going to go into this letter for teacher. This says letter to teacher final. It ends up giving them that blank document on the second page. I have the rubric already in there so that they could go ahead and see it. The reason why I like doing this is, number one, students sometimes will go ahead, they'll go to Drive and they'll make it. And they end up not sharing it correctly. So they don't put it back in Google Classroom. They share it through your email then, and of course, they don't end up doing the correct share settings. Maybe they named it untitled, or they name it something really wacky, and you can't go find it. When I take control of naming the document, sharing it with them through Google Classroom, and making it have a copy, it is really helpful to not only the student for taking that step out that they don't have to do, but I do find it helpful later if you then have to go back in your Google Drive and you just want to do a quick search for it instead of digging through Google Classroom. It will be a lot easier for you. So the last thing I see popping up in a lot of the technology groups I'm in is, what do we do with that late work and those resubmissions? And although Google Classroom may not have a good answer for you, I hope I do. So I had a co-teacher and I in English try to figure out, how do we keep on top of the late work? I didn't want all the emails sent from Google Classroom to my Gmail account. I didn't want students just coming up to me and me writing it down and posting a note. So what we decided to do is we came up with this idea of a revision log. It is a topic that I usually keep at the top of my classwork that is always there. I set it up at the beginning of the year. I'm going to show you one that is going to be for this next school year. And it is that students go in, they fill out their name, what period they belong to, the reason for submitting to the revision log, whether they were absent, late work, or they're revising. They give you the name of the assignment and the URL. So if I was to go through and do this, I'm going to grab the shared link here so I can get that. So if I was doing this as a student, I would put my info in here. I'm in period 1. I was absent. This is my letter to teacher. And then I paste it in there and I hit submit. When I then go back into the editing part of the form, I could see that I have one response, but it isn't here that I am really intrigued by this. It's when I go into the spreadsheet. These and all the revisions or late work people are doing show up in order. So what I tell students that I'm going to do is that I am going to grade these in the order that they appear. Usually I set aside Fridays for that. I can set it up to be able to get an email for email notification for responses if I feel like getting that. On the front page, if we finish a unit, I usually don't accept late work past a unit. I will say the last day of the turn, everything for To Kill a Mockingbird is Friday, whatever that date is, and then I will add that to my list of things I'm no longer accepting. So there is that way of being able to use something as simple as a Google form to help you manage that late work and revision work.
Thank you for taking the time to watch my video today. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to see more of my content. You can connect with my digital co-teacher on the follow social media sites, including Teachers Pay Teachers, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Have the best day ever.